The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Today on Leadership Lunch, we're going to be talking about 3 business networking tips that you can use to be more effective during the holidays. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the webinar. My name is Andrew Winnig. I've got a bunch of people on the call, so just a couple of administrative things as we get started. The first is there are a bunch of people on the call, so I put everyone in mute mode. In fact, right now, if you can find a way on your control panel to raise your hand, if you can hear my voice and see the screen, I'd appreciate if you go ahead and raise your hand using the control panel there so I know the technology is working. Excellent, thank you very much. And so once again, since you're on mute, the best way to interact with me during the call is to send questions in through the chat box. So if anything comes to you during the course of the call, you can feel free to send the question in through the chat box that's there on your control panel as well. And I will get to every question. If I don't get to every question live, then I promise that I will get to you offline and answer any question or comment that you have. So as a couple more people log on, I'd like to get started by putting up the first poll. So please let me know when you give your elevator pitch, what kind of response you usually get from your prospects. Excellent, thank you. Yes, that's interesting. Actually, is the most common response I get from people's elevator pitches, and in a minute we will discover what you really want people to say. That's interesting. Actually, isn't so much interest. It does not express so much interest. So in a minute we'll talk about what you're actually looking for from your elevator pitch. But there's a good reason that this happens when we're out in the world doing business networking. And the reason is I was giving a talk down at Yale University recently, and I hadn't gotten more than halfway through my talk on communication skills for business networking when a brave young man on the third row raised his hand and said, "Mr. Winnig, I have a question." I said, "Okay." He said, "What's business networking?" And he's right. This is not taught in the schools. But business networking is not something you learn about in school. It's not something you even really learn about when you get out into the world. And so it's no wonder that when salespeople are told to develop relationships and build trust, you see a lot of people hitting the streets or hitting the phones, and what you come up with is a lot of frustration. And so the theme of what we're talking about today is a better way, and it's called Trusted Advisor or referral selling. And it's all about business networking, and it all starts with the elevator pitch. So what we're going to do today, we're going to talk about my story, how I went from not being a salesman to being a cold call salesman to being a referral-based salesman. We're then going to talk about the elevator pitch, dispel some of the myths, talk about what the elevator pitch really is and how it's such a great tool for you in your business networking toolkit. We'll then have 3 tips that will help you be more effective during the holidays. And at the end, there's a distinction between elevator pitches. There are actually 2 major kinds of elevator pitches, and a lot of people get confused as to which one to use when. And so at the very end of the webinar, I will talk about the 2 different types of elevator pitches and when is the best time to use them. So let's get ready, get set, and let's network. So I built my first computer. My story is that I built my first computer when I was 13 years old. Yes, I am that much of a geek. And yes, I have that little background in sales. So I went to school for computers, and I went out into the world as a computer scientist, and I had about a 12-year career doing programming and managing engineers in the computer world. And the ultimate point in my career came when I was at a web startup in the late 1990s. I was the 8th guy in. We grew it to 120 people, shrank it back to 20, and then locked the doors on our way out. All this happened over the course of about 18 months. And in that time, we had actually made 0 sales, which actually isn't perfectly fair because we had gotten a check from Real Networks, you know, the real player, the big company. They had sent us a check for $100,000 for some stuff that we had done. But if you do a little bit of quick math, 120 engineers, $100,000, we spent more than the check on the party to celebrate receiving the check. So I feel very comfortable saying in that entire time, we never made any sales. And I vowed never to depend on others to make sales for me ever again. So in the early 2000s, there were not a lot of computer jobs available. I actually thought of franchising as a way of getting into business without having all the risks of being in business. And so I actually found this franchise called Fish Window Cleaning, and I hit the street cold call selling because that's Fish's model. You hit the street, you walk into doors, you do cold call selling. And I was being relatively successful at that. The big turning point for me the big turning point when I moved from kind of cold call salesman towards doing more referral sales, is that I walked into the Cambridge Chamber of Commerce one day. And of course, I was there to sell them window cleaning. They ended up selling me on a chamber membership. And this was the beginning of a relationship that continues to this day, where I've learned to connect with people and actually get referrals from people, right? It's not the kind of thing that happens all at once. There are skills to it. There is a way of building up that kind of trust and building up the relationship. And that day when I walked into the chamber was the day that I started that process. And now today, I own 2 businesses. I run a volunteer organization, about 150 people. I'm part of 4 networking groups. I have a wife and 2 children under 2. And people look at me all the time and say, you know, how many hours are in your day? How can you possibly do all that? And the answer is that I think like a leader. I see opportunities, and I've developed a lot of these skills that we'll be talking about that make it less time-intensive for me to do sales. There are a lot of people out there looking for sales for me, and I'm looking for sales for them. And I tell you, the stuff that comes from referral, they're really much better jobs than anything you could find off a cold call. And so what happens now is that I see opportunities, and I've got to say that the holidays are an enormous opportunity for business networking, just an absolutely enormous opportunity. And so what happened for me was that now I do about 7 presentations a month, and I sign up about 10 new customers a month, and it's all off referral selling. I mean, I will cold call sell if I have to, but I haven't had to in quite a while because the referrals for presentations and those sorts of things really come in. And as I said, it took me several years to learn this, and part of the reason that I do these webinars, part of the reason that I do the work that I do, is to help people get to that point faster, help you get to the point that you can do referral selling faster, learn those skills. And so what we're going to talk about now, as I said, this all starts with the elevator pitch. And the elevator pitch is a very, very misunderstood process and technique. It comes from the idea that you could be stuck in the elevator, you're stuck in the elevator for 30 seconds with a great prospect for you. And kind of if you Google on the internet and look on the internet, the idea is to develop a compelling speech about what you do. And in fact, the elevator pitch is the best tool you can ever use for getting referrals. But it actually is not at all about you. The thing that my clients find most interesting is that the elevator pitch has almost nothing to do with you. It's all about your prospect. And the purpose of the elevator pitch is to start that conversation, right? I mean, you don't expect sales to be made in the elevator, right? You're not looking to close the guy or the woman in the elevator. What you're looking to do in the elevator is start the conversation so that then you can do your sales pitch. And this is a very clear distinction I make for people, that the elevator pitch is really that first start of the conversation. It's where you start that process. And once someone says to you, oh, how do you do that? That's when you actually move into your sales pitch, right? Once someone said to you, how do you do that, or I want to know more about that, you're actually done with your elevator pitch and you're moving into your sales pitch. Then you set up the appointment, then you sit down with them, then you can talk about your expertise. But the whole idea of the elevator pitch is to get them interested that way, to get that process started, to get the conversation started. And if you want more information about this, I encourage you to go to our archive at trustedadvisorwebinars.com. There are a bunch of webinars out there on these kinds of skills and on ideas for improving your elevator pitch. And once again, I promise this. So the ideal response to an elevator pitch, we a lot of people get kind of a that's interesting and polite head nod. The ideal response to your elevator pitch is, well, how do you do that? Because then you can start talking about then you have permission to start talking about what it is that you do. So I'd like right now to put up, and so the elevator pitch is actually, it turns social interactions into sales opportunities. That's the idea of the elevator pitch. You can be standing next to someone at a Little League game or on the ski slopes or in an elevator, and you just start a conversation with them, and you can discover opportunities. And that's really why the elevator pitch is such an important part of anybody who's looking to do referral selling. So as we move into our first tip, what I'd like to do is put up the next poll. So please let me know, what are your expectations? What's your major expectation when you go to a networking event? What are you looking to get out of a networking event? Excellent. So yes, as usual, there is a range of things going on. That is great. So what we're going to talk about now, in order to talk about this first technique that I'm going to talk about, I don't know if any of you are college basketball fans, but I'm certainly a fan of their tournament in March. It's called March Madness, right? And it's when 64 teams get the bid and they get together, and you have 2 weeks of basketball playing, and it's very exciting. Everyone bets on it. Everyone fills out brackets like it's this huge thing. And the interesting thing I realized a while back about the brackets is that the chance that any particular team is going to win isn't very good. Right? I mean, in a 64-team tournament, it's 1 in 64, I guess, but it's for some teams it's actually less than that because you kind of really don't expect them to win. And so if you're trying to pick which team is going to win, it's very difficult to do, and that's why there's so much betting on it. But if you turn this around and look at it from the event organizer's point of view, the chance that somebody is going to win, right? The chance that after that 2-week period you will have a winner is 100%, right? There's no question in the tournament organizer's mind that what's going to happen at the end of those 2 weeks when everybody's competing and trying to win is that you will crown a winner. And, of course, the tournament is set up that way. And the good news about business networking is that when you're out business networking, you're actually much more like the tournament organizer than like somebody who's competing in the tournament, right? It's the kind of thing that when you're business networking, in the basketball tournament, the teams practice skills and people have skills and they put those skills out there and try to win. In business networking, it's the same thing. There are 5 basic skills you need when you're doing business networking, when you're looking to build your referral network. It's 5 basic skills. And if you go out and apply those skills, you know that you will generate leads. You don't know where they're going to come from. You don't know when they're going to come. Right? You can't be sure of any of that. You just know that by applying your skills, the tournament organizer knows that by setting up the tournament this way and going this way, they will come up with a winner. And you can be confident that when you apply these skills and go out to networking events and use these skills and have a great elevator pitch, that you will end up with leads. You will end up growing your referral network, and you will end up coming up with more people that you can work with. You develop that trust and find the people that you are interested in working with. So what I'm calling this, I call this the tournament model. The tip here is the tournament tip. And the idea is that you have to be out networking, and you have to be practicing your skills, right? That's really what goes on. And so I got a question coming through. Yes, what are those skills? Thank you very much. Right on cue. So when we talk about business networking skills, as I said, the basic skill is the elevator pitch. And it's not really for the reason that most people think. A lot of people think it's the elevator pitch because that's how you get your referrals, right? Except that if you think through your business networking, you're probably not often meeting your customers at business networking events, right? If you can find a business networking event where there are actual customers, potential customers of yours, that's awesome. But most business networking events, what you're looking to do is find people who can find the prospects for you. Right? What you're looking for are other people. You give your elevator pitch so that other people have a clear sense of what you do and a clear sense of what you're looking for, so that they can pass referrals on to you. And this is actually a much better way of approaching business networking, right? If you go out there with the idea that what you're looking for are other people to understand what you do and be able to go through it. So that's really what we talk about with business networking. That you want to go out there and you want to meet the people, and by having these skills, you will do that. So the rest of the skills are follow-up, one-on-one, professional referrals, and opportunity spotting. And once again, if you go to trustedadvisorwebinars.com, there's a bunch of free stuff out there that will give you more information about these, about how to do these skills. There's a bunch of clips of webinars and things that kind of talk about each of these skills and give you more information about how to develop these skills so that you can do this business networking. And this is a lot of the work that I do with people that, it always starts off with the elevator pitch, getting your elevator pitch really down pat. But then the questions come up, okay, so I went to a business networking event and I've got this stack of cards, how do I work through that? Or, I went to a business networking event and I need to follow up with people, but what does that look like? How frequently can I do that? And those are the kinds of questions that we work through in this set of business networking skills. Those are the kinds of skills that you learn about. So the first tip that we've talked about today, the first technique, is called the tournament. And the idea is that you're learning your skills, going out and putting your skills in play. And as from the player's point of view, you don't know who's going to win. But as the tournament organizer, you know that you will end up getting referrals. And so you can go into it not knowing exactly what the result will be, but knowing that you're doing the right kind of work to get to where you need to be. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to pause for about 30 seconds. I want to let you think about the tournament model and how it affects what you're doing with your business networking and how it affects how you might go about things this holiday. If you're inspired to send something through the chat box, I'd be happy to take a look at it, and I'd always love to get your comments. But once again, I'm going to go quiet for about 30 seconds. I just want you to think about the tournament model, about the fact that somebody's going to win is 100% guaranteed, and see how that applies to your business networking this holiday season. Great. Okay, so let's move on to our second. Let's move on to our second skill. And I can hear people saying, "Great. So to be effective at the holidays, you tell me that I need skills, need to practice my skills, and you kind of told me what the skills are, but not giving me any way of kind of preparing. Like, what do I need to do?" And so let's start this off with another poll. Let's see. At the moment, how do you, Jen? What's the biggest way that you prepare for a networking event? You're going to a networking event. What's your major mode of preparation? Thank you, as always, for your feedback. And it's always interesting to me how many people prefer to wing it, right? That people are like, I don't know how to prepare, so I'm just going to go wing it. And I don't know about you, but it seems to me that my business growth is too big a thing to kind of leave to chance, right? That if you're just going to wing it, it seems to leave too many things to chance, and that's really the benefit that comes from my elevator pitch workshop. That what we do is we work on how to start those conversations, right? We work on so you know what you're going to say, you're comfortable with what you say, and you know that what you're saying will actually generate the correct response, whatever that. We'll talk more about what the response could be, but you know that what you're saying will generate the correct response. And again, if you want more information about good responses or how to start a conversation, there's information about that at trustedadvisorwebinars.com. So how do you prepare? How do you prepare for a networking event? A few years ago, I'm a big softball fan. I grew up as a baseball fan. I've been a Boston Red Sox fan all my life. I love playing baseball. I'm getting up enough in years that I prefer playing softball now because it's a little bit slower. I can be more of a star in softball. But about 5 years ago, I wasn't hitting the way I wanted to hit. I had kind of, for those of you who know baseball, I had strong power to my opposite field, which doesn't really make much sense. It seemed to me that I should be hitting more consistently and stronger, and I wasn't hitting well. And so I went to take a class. At the local batting cages, you pay the guy $35, I think, and he gives you a 45-minute lesson on hitting. And the really interesting thing about this was that he taught me 3 things about hitting that I hadn't known before. The first was you have to flip the bat through the zone. The second is that your hips have to be involved. And the third one has to do with how you step or don't step, right? So there's 3 things that have to all line up: the step, the hips, and the swing that give you that create a good hitter, right? And I would not have known that those were kind of the 3 basic skills, but those are the 3 basic skills. And so what I did for the next 18 months was practice this every chance I got. I went to the batting cages and take 50 to 100 pitches at a time, and I started looking for different pitches, right? When I changed my swing around, the pitches that I used to like changed. So I started to like new pitches, and there were different things that I could do with different pitches, and so there was a lot of stuff that didn't make sense. And in fact, in my games, I was doing much worse. For those 18 months, and of course it was only about a season and a half. 18 months over baseball, it's about a season and a half in actual baseball time. But in that time, my hitting actually got worse. I got worse at hitting because I was trying to retool my skills and trying to figure out which pitches I liked now. Again, there was a lot of stuff. And over the course of those 18 months, I probably hit 500 or 700 pitches at the batting cages, which if you calculate how many pitches you actually see in a season, I went through a lot of seasons through that whole thing. And so what's the point of this? Well, the point of it now is that when I'm up at bat, I hit a home run every game. And I expect to hit a home run every at bat. But the really cool thing is that when I don't hit a home run every at bat, I know what went wrong. And it's knowing what went wrong. I can think to myself, you know what, my hips weren't in at that time, or I didn't swing correctly, right? I've hit enough pitches that I know which pitches are right, and I know if I don't hit something correctly, what I did wrong. And this is really what I teach people. What we're going to talk about, the second tip today, is learning the two basic skills of doing an elevator pitch. We're going to learn the two basic skills of doing an elevator pitch. And it's the kind of thing that I really encourage you, if you have questions, to go ahead and email me, because it's not the kind of, it's the kind of thing that does take practice. And the work that I do with people is to work on some stuff, and then you go out and practice it so that we can tune it, because the only thing that really matters is how people respond to your elevator pitch. But now when I go out and do a presentation or do a pitch, if it works, then that's great, and I'm very excited, and most of the time it does. And if it doesn't work, I can break it apart and figure out what went wrong so I can fix it. And that's really what I like to help people with. And the people on this call, a lot of you said that you get a "that's interesting" off your elevator pitch. And that's a really good time to go out to my website and take a look at some of the resources that are there for improving your elevator pitch. Because what you really want someone to do is say, how do you do that so you can get them into a conversation? So how do you prepare for elevator pitches? Well, you prepare for elevator pitches by practicing elevator pitches. And the cool thing about business networking is that you don't really know people until you've been to an event 4 or 5 times, right? If you go to a networking event once, there's almost no value in that, because people need to know that you're going to keep showing up, and there's an element of trust that they kind of keep seeing you. That's when you can actually start to develop trust. So what we're looking at is that you want to be practicing this, and this is why the holidays are such an awesome time for this, because there are a lot of parties. There's a lot of times, there are a lot of ways that people get together outside of work in the holidays, more than any other time of the year. And when I say this to people, they always get nervous. Say, but I don't want to sell to my friends. I don't want to come across like I'm being salesy. And I assure you that the two skills we're going to talk about now do not make you sound salesy at all, right? There's no reason you should ever sound salesy. And some of my best clients I have actually signed up on the ski slopes or at parties. And of course, I didn't sign them up at that moment. But at that moment, what I did was create the conversation where I could do follow-up calls with them and eventually close the deal with them. And so once again, that's what we're looking for at business networking. Every party you're at is an opportunity to talk about what you do. And my wife always jokes with me. She says, "Are you always working?" And I'm like, "Well, sure. At a business networking event, when I'm out meeting people, I like talking about what I do. I don't try to sell them. I'm not overbearing about it. But if people ask me what I do, I tell them, and I tell them in such a way that can generate a good conversation. And once again, I do expect those conversations to start now. So the two basic keys to an elevator pitch. The first thing you need is there's this cool one-sentence story competition that goes on. How do you tell a story in one sentence? But what I'm really looking for people is that you need a one-sentence overview. And so when someone says to you, "What do you do?" you need to have one sentence that you can say to them, right? When you're in a conversational kind of environment, you don't want to launch into your full-blown formal elevator pitch. When you're in this kind of social environment, someone says, "What do you do?" you need to have one single sentence that you can come up with. And the best technique that I've seen for this, the technique that really works, is what I call "I work with." And the key behind it is you say, so one of my clients, they come up with this work with statement. "I work with private schools to control their energy costs." And this is really cool because it's not putting the other person on the spot, but it is giving them specific things that they can think about. I went to a private school. I have contacts at my private school. They might be interested in changing their energy costs, right? And so the key to this, though, and where people go wrong with this, is that everyone tries to throw everything into it, right? Well, I can work with big companies or small companies, and I can work with CEOs, and I can work with leaders, and I can work with directors. And what you're really looking for your elevator pitch, and especially it's when you start listing all those things that you start to sound salesy, right? If someone says to you, "What do you do?" and you say, "I work with private schools to control their energy costs," it's very clean. They might be interested. They might not. The conversation flows naturally from, right? If they ask about it, you can talk more about it. If they don't, you can move on to something else that you'd like to talk about, which is the other key for business networking. And so for example, what I use with my "I work with" statement, I work with business professionals who want to generate more leads at networking events, right? That's what I do. And you know what? Some people are very interested in that. Some people aren't interested in that at all. But it does work well at a business networking event because people who are there are generally interested in finding more leads. And so what we're talking about here is this kind of one-sentence thing. And once again, the key here, I work with this, all my clients. All my clients have this. It's kind of built into our society, that when you're talking about your elevator pitch, people say, but I do other things. What happens if I have all these other things that I need to bring in? And what you're doing is you're confusing your elevator pitch with your sales pitch. right? People aren't actually more intrigued by the more things you do. People are more intrigued by single things that you do very, very well. And if you can get them into a conversation, you can find out other things that they're interested in, and you can certainly offer to help them with those. But once again, the elevator pitch is about starting that conversation. And it's much, much cleaner to start that conversation with a very, very simple one-sentence statement. And again, it's not a run-on sentence. It's just, I work with this group of people who want to solve this kind of problem. And that's the kind of work that I do with people in the elevator pitch workshop, is to come up with an I work with statement for it, right? Come up with your one-sentence thing. So what happens then, right? So what we're doing is working through. You're at a business networking event. It's the holidays. You're at an event, and someone says to you, "What do you do?" And you say, "Well, I work with private schools who want to control their energy costs." And they say, "Wow, tell me more about that." And so then what do you say? Because at a holiday party, it's not really right. So, "Oh, you set up an appointment, and I can talk to you more about it." And so what we talk about next is the two-sentence story. And you'll notice that the things are very clean here, right? I mean, you have a one sentence. If you look at the way I teach the elevator pitch, you have a four-sentence elevator pitch. There's a power question, a compelling two-sentence story of one of your customers, and a call to action. Those are the four sentences. And it's only four sentences. And once again, you don't give those four sentences in the conversational mode that we're talking about for the holidays. But once you've worked out those four elements, you can weave them together, right? The I work with can be your power question, and then when someone asks for more information, you can give an example of you can give an example. And what's an example of a two-sentence story? Well, again, the two-sentence story that I use is, I was working with someone who used to say, when you asked what she did, that she was a mortgage broker. And at the time, the housing industry was in trouble. So people would say to her, "Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. Things must be terrible for you." The truth was that she was doing fine, except that her elevator pitch was putting her on the defensive so fast that she couldn't convince people that mortgages were available. After going through our 2-hour proprietary process, she now says that the best thing that recently happened to her is that she helped a young couple purchase their very first home. And so you'll notice that was actually 3 sentences, but the idea is to really narrow it down, really pare it down so you have a sense of what the issue was and how they solved it. And it really can't ever be over 3 sentences, right? But you're really looking that if you can tie it down to 2 sentences, it's a really powerful example. And so we talked about 2 techniques. Kind of got a twofer in this webinar. That this technique is actually 2 different techniques. The first is the one-sentence overview, and the second is the 2-sentence story. And once again, this is a lot of the work that goes on in the elevator pitch workshop. That you start with kind of what your one-sentence thing is, and you can have different ones, right? But the issue is that each time you give it, you just give one sentence. And then you come up with a bunch of 2-sentence stories. So depending on what someone asks you, you have a story worked out that you can tell, right? You don't have to make it up on the spot. You don't have to wing it. You know what people are going to be asking about. You know what your most compelling customers are. And so what we work through is looking at your most compelling customers and paring down this story to 2 sentences, right? 2 really compact sentences that shows people how you can offer them value. So that's what ties it all together. And so again, what we've been talking about here, I call it the 1132. How do you know when you're ready to go to a networking event? And the way you know that you're ready to go to a networking event is that you have one sentence overview and you have 3 2-sentence stories, right? And why do you need 3 2-sentence stories? Because the first story may not resonate with the person that you're with. They may ask you another question. Right? You sound like a very one-note Johnny if you can only talk about one. If you only talk about one customer. And once again, it's not that you say all these sentences to people when you meet them. Right? "Hi, nice to meet you. I do this and I do this and I do this." What happens is you weave it into the conversation. Someone asks you a question, say, "Oh, I can best answer that with an example. I was recently working with someone, who was using this as her elevator pitch, and after going through the process, now she uses this, and that's starting a better conversation for her." That's the model. That's the template that I use and the model that I like to use when you're looking to prepare. So far we've gone through the first technique is the tournament technique, which says that you got to be out there. When you're out there and executing these skills, you know that you're going to end up with leads. The second technique is how do you prepare? And once again, the preparation is you have one sentence overview and 3 2-sentence stories that you've practiced and can use. And so I'm going to stop now. What I'd like you to do is think about your I work with, right? Think about kind of what your customers are like. Think about what your I work with would be. So I'm going to go quiet for 30 seconds. Just think about that, and then we'll go on to the third technique. Great. You're all doing great. Okay, so let's move on to the next technique. Again, once again, we'll start there with a poll. So when you give your elevator pitch, or when you meet people, what is your call to action? Just give me a sense of what your call to action is right now. Great, thank you. So what we're talking about now is the call to action. You want people to jump, as I said, it's the third element of the elevator pitch, it's the call to action. You want people to jump up and do something as a result of giving your elevator pitch. And there are a bunch of things that this can be. If you don't have a call to action, then you're kind of wasting your time at a business networking event, because if what you're looking to do is build your business network and keep in touch with people, if there's not something that you want to do to continue things, it's going to be very difficult to kind of get traction on anything. So I really recommend that you have a call to action. At the other extreme is setting up the appointment, which might or might not be appropriate, right? As we talked about in the networking event, you may or may not be meeting with your customer. You may want they may be able to bring you referrals, and so if you want to set up an appointment, you should, right? And it's always a great, it's awesome if someone says, I need to hear more about that. Let's set up a sales appointment. Then you can set up a sales appointment and move on from there. But I like the call to action to be a little bit of a softer kind of thing. And there are two calls to action that I found to be very, very effective. The first is an email newsletter that I offer, an elevator pitch tips email newsletter, which I believe most people on the call actually heard about the call from that newsletter. And as you know, I at every opportunity I get, I put people on the newsletter because I'm offering value and offering people ways to improve their elevator pitch. And so that's frequently one of my calls to action. If we're kind of looking, talking to someone, we're kind of looking at each other, and they seemed a little bit interested in kind of elevator pitch, to say, you know what, can I put you on my newsletter? I send out a monthly elevator pitch tip, and would that be interesting? And most people will say, sure, that sounds great. And so that's a really good way of keeping in touch with people, of keeping in touch with people. Like that's a great way to keep in touch, is have an email newsletter. And it's a little bit of work to set one up and get it moving, but it is one of the most valuable things that I do. And it does give you this built-in call to action that really, really works well. The second call to action that I really like to use is that I do public speaking. I do keynote speeches. And I always tell people that a great referral for me is a business association that's looking for a keynote speaker. And this works really well because it's not really putting someone on the spot, right? It's not something they're going to do. They're not going to become a customer. But you have no idea how many people are program directors. I have a lot of friends who are actually program directors for business associations that I wouldn't have known. And by giving this call to action, they're able to help me. And you may not have a presentation, you may not like to do public speaking, but what you're looking for is something like that. You do a lunch and learn. You're looking for some way of connecting with people, of staying in touch with people, and letting people know the more specific you are about what you're looking for, the better people can help you, right? So I'm looking for business associations that bring in keynote speakers, very, very specific. And again, that's part of the elevator pitch workshop, is coming up with what it is that you're looking for to move things forward. And we do, of course, have webinars on this at trustedadvisorwebinars.com if you're interested in kind of more techniques for follow-up and how to, the kinds of things you can do to keep in touch with people and have one-on-ones. There's a lot of information on that in our archive. So once again, what we've been talking about here is the call to action. And the two really good calls to action are you put someone on an email newsletter list, right? And it means you actually have to be providing value on at least monthly basis. But that's a good way of keeping in touch with people. And the other is to be really specific about a kind of referral they can give you in a non-in-your-face kind of way, right? I don't say, give me the name of some business associations that you work with, right? I say, great referral for me is any business association that brings in a keynote speaker. So it's good to say it softly like that. So what we've gone through here is and again, as professional speakers, that it works for professional speakers. So the third technique we've been talking about is the call to action. And as you're going about your holiday networking, you really want to be, putting people on your list or telling people how they can help you, right? If you tell people how they can help you, they can really go around and help you. So I'd like to pause for a second here, put up the final poll, and just ask you, of the three strategies we talked about today, which one you're going to find the most helpful as you head into your holiday networking season. Excellent. Thank you. I always value your feedback, of course, and I'll take this opportunity to say that at the end of the webinar, you will get an evaluation. And of course, this webinar series is for all of you, so please feel free to please do fill out the evaluation. I'm always interested in what you have to say, and I'm interested in your feedback. So the final thing we'll do today is, I promised, the distinction between the two major types of elevator pitches. And when we talk about an elevator pitch, the thing that most people think about is you're at a BNI or a chamber meeting, right, and you have a chance to stand up for 30 seconds and talk about yourself. And we call this the formal pitch, right? That's the formal pitch. And really everything starts with the formal pitch, because once you have nailed your formal pitch, you have your power question, you have a couple of two-sentence stories, you can tie it all together. It becomes very easy to weave that into a conversation, right? Once you've kind of done the work of, if you get a chance to stand up for 30 seconds and give your speech, and you have a very powerful speech, then it's very easy to turn that into a conversational thing, whereas if you're trying to come at it from the conversational side, it can be a little more challenging. So what I like to do with my clients is work out their full four-sentence elevator pitch, and it doesn't take any more than that, right? I have several of these I use for myself, four-sentence elevator pitch, that really generates a lot of leads for me on the spot. And I like helping other people with that, helping you come up with that. And so the first is a formal. The second kind of elevator pitch is the conversational elevator pitch. And the conversational elevator pitch, it really starts with one sentence. The interesting thing about the conversational elevator pitch is that it's not an elevator pitch like most people think about elevator pitches. But if you have your conversational elevator pitch is a way of getting someone to ask you a question that you can answer with elements of your formal elevator pitch, right? I like to think of it that way. That what you're looking to do is engage someone in a conversation, and by having the formal pitch, you kind of know where you want to go. You've rehearsed it enough that you know the stories, and the stories can kind of slip off your tongue, and then it's very easy to get into the conversational side of things. So once again, what we've been talking about today is really the elevator pitch. We talked about the tournament model, we talked about how to prepare, and we talked about really having a strong call to action that isn't about setting up an appointment or turning someone into a customer, but it's about keeping in touch with people, about building the relationship. And we've gone briefly through the formal versus conversational elevator pitch. And of course, as you go through your holiday networking, that's really the conversational elevator pitch, right? If you kind of if someone says, "What do you do?" and you kind of stand up and give your 4 sentences, that's a little bit awkward in social situations. But if you just give a one-sentence thing and let people ask questions and drive the conversation from there, nobody feels like you're being salesy. People feel like you're interesting and you're having a conversation. You're talking about something that's interesting to them. So that's really what I recommend. So be sure to join us next month. We're going to be devoting a whole talk to follow-up, how you do follow-up, three tips that you can use to follow up effectively with people when you're doing your business networking. Thank you for being part of today's webinar. Happy networking, and I look forward to seeing you next month. Thank you, everyone.